Everyone, we're going to get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm April Dawson-Rawlings, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Commission on Disability Access. And I want to welcome all of you to Disability Compliance at Places of Business to Improve Access for All. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what CCDA is all about, and then I am going to ask Lahia to introduce herself, and then I'll introduce the moderator, and then we'll introduce the panel. The California Commission on Disability Access's mission is to increase access across California through dialogue and collaboration with stakeholders, including but not limited to the business and disability communities and all levels of government. And this is one of the ways that we live this mission, is hosting forums like this. So this is our fourth community forum since 2022. And we have hosted forums in Orange County, San Jose, and Monterey. And now we're here in San Mateo County. And we're here to brainstorm about the challenges and opportunities related to improving access for people with disabilities to local businesses here in San Mateo County. So I just want to take the time to thank some of the people that made this possible today. I'd love to thank Lahia and her team at the Center for Independence for People with Disabilities. And I would like to thank the San Mateo Chamber and Erica for being here today, and Ida and the Division of the State Architect, and as well as all of our commissioners who are here, and for all of your leadership in increasing access across California. And now I'm going to turn it to Lahia to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your organization. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. Buenas tardes. My name is Ligia Andrade Zúñiga. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm the executive director at CID, the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities. We have 5 core services that we provide to the community along with other services. We are rooted in disability justice and disability pride. We also have youth transition services, and we provide a lot of different support for folks in the community. And so I've got some of our team here today. We have an office in San Mateo and in San Bruno. And so if you have a disability and you need some services, come and see us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lahia. This is April, and I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator for today's session, Commissioner Dr. Luciana Profaca, and she is one of our CCDA commissioners, and I'm going to take a moment to read her biography. Commissioner Dr. Profaca has been committed to the equality, independence, and employment of people with disabilities for over 5 decades. She began her career with the California Department of Rehabilitation in 1972 and served in several roles at DOR until her retirement in 2010, which included interim director, chief deputy director, all the way to senior vocational rehabilitation counselor. During her time at DOR, which stands for Department of Rehabilitation, she was able to implement initiatives aimed at enhancing the lives of individuals with physical, sensory, mental health, intellectual, and developmental disabilities. And in 2013, she established her own counseling practice to provide essential therapeutic support to individuals experiencing anxiety, depression, and various challenges in life. In addition to her government responsibilities, she has contributed her knowledge and expertise as an adjunct professor in the rehabilitation counseling program at San Francisco State University, as well as the counseling psychology program at the University of San Francisco. And she has been a consultant with the Technical Assistance in Counselor Education program with San Diego State University Foundation's Interwork Institute. And she has been on many boards and councils, including the Board for Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. She earned her Bachelor of Psychology degree from San Francisco State University, as well as a Master of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling from San Francisco State, and a doctorate in clinical psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies. And in addition to her family, her passions include travel and music. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to Commissioner Dr. Profaca, who will lead us into the program and introduce the panelists today.
What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I welcome all of you. I'm so glad you're here. It's lovely to see a room full of people who are committed to access for people with disabilities and for full access to business. That's what we're all about here today. So we'd like to start with kind of modeling what it is to have full access and what it is to be really conscious around issues around disability. So I'm a person with gray hair. I'm wearing black pants and a burgundy colored jacket. I'm in a room full of people with many, many of you. To my right is a long list of panel members. We have ASL interpreters with us today, both on our video screens as well as in person. We have a Spanish-speaking interpreter with us today. We have screens, full access is what we're all about, and we're very proud of that commitment to access, as is CID, I know for sure. So let me begin by also sharing that if you look at our space, we've widened the area so that wheelchairs have easy access to us. We've requested that our attendees not wear perfumes and other scents that affect individuals, some individuals. So access is important to all of us. We sent a number of questions in advance asking for people's inputs. We'll provide responses to those questions. At some point, you'll have an opportunity to address those questions. And if they're very general, thank you, present them here today. If they're less general, we have various resources for you to bring those questions to you. In addition to the organizations represented, we have CID here. We have the Division of the State Architect. And the Division of the State Architect, Clair, is our state architect, offers technical assistance to promote compliance with regulations, strives to create a safer and more inclusive built environment in California. You know that CID is also a great resource for any questions around ADA and other issues of disability-related issues. We have mic runners in the room, so at the time that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments, you'll raise your hand and somebody will bring a mic to you. So we're here to have an open dialogue, open discussion. So let me start, if I might, with introducing our panel members. We have Peter Chiu from the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities. He's an employee with that organization. Peter, thank you for being with us today. Ben McMullan, also from CID, also an employee. Clair, our state architect, who is also one of our commissioners on the California Commission on Disability Access. And Erica Wood, who's the president and CEO of the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce. So I thank you all for being here today. To get started, we're here to really talk about how do we remove barriers and achieve accessibility for all. And as Director Dawson Rawlings identified, our goal today is to have an open dialogue discussion on how to increase access to businesses to people with disabilities in San Mateo County. This is one of several forums that we're holding in partnership with local stakeholders. The goal with these forums is to increase the business community's capacity to provide equal access through 1, technical education, 2, resource sharing, and 3, relationship building, because we all know that access benefits everyone and is good for business. As we know too, access compliance is something that impacts all of us in various ways. So before we dive into the panel questions, we will begin with the opportunity to hear directly from customers themselves. Their experiences, their feedback, their insights will set the tone of the panel discussion and provide valuable context. With that, let's begin by hearing from our customers. Thank you again all for being here. So we'll begin the far end there with Peter Chiu, again from CID. Take it away, Peter.
Okay, can you hear me?
And let me ask the question directly.
Sure.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and just from your lens as a customer, what is one thing you want businesses to know about serving customers with disabilities?
One thing I think I would like business owners to know is that from my perspective, and I know that I'm speaking as a person in a quadriplegic in a wheelchair, so from my own experience, but from my lens of a customer, it is a select few businesses that I will. Okay. From my lens, it's how many barriers of entry does it take me even just to get into your establishment? For me personally, I'd like to do things very independently without someone with me. So, you know, I love to support local small businesses. But if I can't get into your establishment, whether it be an accessible door entrance, a clear door with maybe an employee standing there to see that I'm waiting outside. Just getting into the business itself, first and foremost, is difficult. Well, let me step back. Actually, before I even say, there's even anxiety before I get to a business because I have to prepare myself, prepare in many different ways, in the sense of a friend wants to invite, say, hey, Pete, we're all going to go out to dinner at yada, yada, yada. Can you meet us at 8 p.m.? Well, first thing I always ask them, and my good friends are always pretty good about checking accessibility, but I ask them, is it accessible? And they always say, well, we called them and they said yes. And I said, okay. But I've been injured now for 23 years. So a little bit quick about myself. I've been in the service industry. I worked at McDonald's for 4 years. I was in the restaurant industry. So I've been on both ends of this. The point of there is very anxious is just for a simple example, they say that the restaurant, the place is accessible. There's so many times where I get to the restaurant and I can't get under the table. So now what I have to do is I prepare, and thank God for technology. I have Yelp. If they have pictures of the dining room, I do my best to take pictures, to look at the pictures so I can see at the tables, to see whether I'm able to even get into the tables. So I have to research where I'm going before I go. And I guess as a lens of consumer, I would leave with lastly is that I got injured in 2001. So now that'd be 23 years. I know ADA was passed in 1990. Things have definitely gotten better, but I felt like in my 23 years, I had to adapt to the businesses rather than the businesses adapt to me. And I say that because it took me about 10 years to find the right wheelchair because I couldn't get into any tables. So I had to adapt to the businesses rather than the businesses adapt to me. Can I pass it to Ben?
Next, Ben McMullan from the Center for Independent.
So I guess I'll just kind of pick up where Peter was touching on. It's doing kind of your research to see what the place of business offers, whether it be a restaurant or different facilities, and really trying to plan out how you're going to access those things, and whether you're with large groups. Also just knowing, what you might need help with to properly inform people at the place of business what you need, because nobody knows your needs, or I should speak in the first person. Nobody knows my needs as well as I do. So it's really that communication and just making yourself part of the environment as well. And know that, it's constant education, right? I mean, everything might not be perfect. People with disabilities have different concerns, but it's really that comfortability with educating, and knowing people will, might need a little bit more education, and being willing to hear it. So it's really always advocating for oneself and knowing what you need in a particular situation to make a situation work for you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
So what did we hear? Barriers are real. Education is so critically important. People with disabilities want to be part of their community, and being in businesses is part of our communities, all of our communities.
Mm.
So thank you, Peter and Ben. So let's start with the question for the whole panel. Why is access important to you? And if we can, let's start with Clair.
So I'm a firm believer in equity, always have been. Formatively, my years prior to coming to state service were in affordable housing, and I was an affordable housing specialist and really understood providing housing for everyone, and the equity in that is what's critical and important, and was always the torch that I designed to. And so transitioning into the state service and becoming the chief access compliance officer for the state really had a lot of meaning for me, because I understood the regulations, but also was able to continue the ability to increase equity through building codes and advance that purpose in this role. So for me, I'm just a firm believer that we need accessibility for all. I think the work the CCDA does is so important, and we love collaborating with the CCDA in that goal. And I think it's sharing that message to everyone over and over and over again. We are all consumers. We are all in this world living together, and none of us, we're all different in different ways, right? And that's the beauty of it, and respecting that and knowing that we need access to the same goods and services everyone does is what's important. So.
Thank you. And Erica Wood, if you could respond to that as well.
Sure. First, I wanted to just say thank you to the California Commission on Disabilities and to CID for your leadership on these issues. I'm really honored to be part of the conversation today, along with my fellow panelists. So at the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce, we say that our strategic purpose as an organization is to promote both a vibrant local economy and a vibrant local community. And to us, we can't achieve one without the other. So when I think about this question of access and why it's important, it both has an economic dimension to it and a community dimension. And the economic dimension is that if we look at the economic power of persons with disability in terms of discretionary and disposable income, it totals 500 billion or more. And that's probably underestimated because I got this data point from a few years ago. So these are potential customers. Peter and Ben want to support small local businesses. These are potential employees for our workplaces. So there's an economic reason why this matters. From a community standpoint, I think that the number of people, with disabilities in the United States today is in the tens of millions. I think it's 61 million was the estimate I saw, and that number is likely to increase over time. That's a huge swath of our communities that we're leaving out and leaving behind. And the businesses that can, take leadership on this issue and be inclusive to everyone, regardless of ability, are really champions of social responsibility. And that in turn, I think, builds stronger connections with their customers, with their employees and the broader community. So to me, access is not just the right or the legal thing to do, it's the right thing to do for these economic and community reasons that I just talked about.
Thank you. Thank you. And Peter and Ben, as a customer with a disability, can you share with us what you believe are the most common barriers faced by people with disabilities in accessing businesses in the city, and any recommendations you would like to offer to address these issues?
Okay. Well, I think there's the access issues vary from place to place. I mean, there's some places that might not be able for people with disabilities to get in just because they don't can't physically access place of business. Even if you get into a restaurant or a place of business, you got to think about the restrooms, right? How big are the restrooms? Can somebody in a wheelchair turn around in the wheelchair? Can somebody with a different disability like cerebral palsy it's accessible to those types of disabilities. So I really think there's a lot to think about. Counter space, that are placed the height of tables, are the like bar stools too high or countertops too high, things of that sort. So there is a lot to think about when it comes to accessibility, and it takes a lot of forethought for sure. And I would just say all communities need to work together as much as possible to address these concerns. I was going to speak to it later, but for instance, like through independent living centers, have gone through a train the trainer program at Pacific ADA. So somebody in my position can go out into the community, and if a place of business has a question on ADA issues, we can work with them to inform them different things and different ways to make their place of business more accessible. So just wanted to bring that into the conversation too. That there's also resources out there that people can collectively share and take advantage of.
Thank you. And Peter?
I think I touched on for me, one of the most common barriers, but I think it's not only just for myself. I looked up a definition of disability, and I think this applies to many of us. Where did I find them? Webster's definition of disability is a physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental condition that impairs, interferes, or limits a person's ability to engage in certain tasks or actions or participate in typical daily activities and interactions. So when I read the question, I thought of not only myself, but I have been fortunate to be part of a adaptive PE program at CSM where I've been exposed to people with a wide range of disabilities. And what's interesting is too is most of those folks that I were in that class with were elderly. And it's really interesting how elderly people don't think of themselves as disabled, where they need a cane, a walker, some sort of mobility device. Now, being labeled disabled is, I mean, for most people, something they don't want a label placed on them. So the common barriers, I think, not only apply to me, but to many others. And I think I'm just going to repeat going back. What are the most common barriers? Entering your storefront. And, you know, I come from a business background and I understand the ROI on putting a push button on your businesses doesn't seem money well spent. But I would have to argue that if you do, people like myself will more likely to frequent your establishment repeatedly. And because I've, in my 23 years experienced so many barriers of entry to frequent local businesses, I can list about, and I'm speaking majority, and I don't know if the statistic is still true, but 9 out of 10 businesses, about 90% of all businesses are restaurants, right? Majority, I mean, we're seeing even shopping centers, brick and mortar are all failing. So they're moving towards experiences. And so I think the general overall economy and the consumer is moving towards experiences. And that includes people with disabilities. And if we can't, well, let me just say this. I know that I'm not going to be able to experience normal things like everyone else. I'm not going to be able to do bocce ball or what might be. But for most, speaking majority, I guess towards restaurants, which I frequent, it's that, like I said, I can think of about 10 restaurants that I go to frequently. And the reason being I go to them again and again and again and again and again is because how accessible their establishment is. And there's many times I've walked in a store and if, like I said, if, you know, I know aesthetics are important, but if you have a beautiful brown wooden door and no employee to see me standing outside, I'm either waiting for someone on the sidewalk to open the door for me. If there's no one in the sidewalk, I'm not going in your establishment. So I can't even spend my money into your place of business if I can't get in. And so normally I can think of a handful of stores and restaurants that I frequent very often because they are accessible.
Thank you, Peter. Do you mind waiting? No, we will take comments and questions. Yes. Thank you for that feedback. Thank you. And that was a question that I was curious about too, the path
Yeah.
of travel to the area. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'd like, sir, I'd like to hear your comment, but I want everybody to hear your comment later. So if you could hold on to it and we'll get you a mic later on so that you can share that. Thank you. No, thank you. We want to hear from you. So the next question is to our state architect, Clair. And the question is, what resources are available in the city and from the state to assist businesses to achieve access compliance?
Before I get to that question, I wanted to just elaborate a little bit more on some of the comments made by
Please.
those who've been trying to gain access. And I think what I find frustrating, and it ties into my response to your question, is that the building standards that we promote set a floor, not a ceiling, on access. And many businesses fail to achieve the floor, right? They fail to meet the minimum requirements because our building code requirements are not responsive to a truly accessible environment. They just set a minimum because we have a responsibility to meet minimum federal standards. California does a little bit better, and has some regulations that are better to achieve greater access. But in tying to that, it is communicating that we're constantly communicating the minimum compliance because we know so many business owners don't even achieve the minimums, that it's very hard to really talk about fully accessible environments in a context that I think truly embraces an engaged community, right? So I do find that a little difficult in that regard. But the resources that we have in achieving minimum compliance and really understanding, at least trying to open that door, as you mentioned, right? If you can't get in the door, and the minimum compliance does address getting in the door. We do have resources. The state architect, as I said, we do building code regulations, and recently the law was changed that governs our authority. Before, our threshold was meeting minimum federal standards. Now we're able to expand a little bit more as long as it's in a national public standard. And so we're looking to expand some of the requirements that have been, that are more current in terms of disability access, because the ADA was passed in 2010, which is now 15 years ago. And current other resources like the ANSI standards and such are much more current. So we can look to some of those and adopt them in our building codes. So, and our process is public. And if you subscribe to our email address, you can participate. Our regulatory processes require the participation of all stakeholders. And that means business owners, it means architects, it means individuals with disabilities, everyone. That's how we get a good, healthy building code and also increase that understanding. We also administer the Certified Access Specialist Program, which I believe has gone a long way to trying to assist business owners in achieving compliance. And that program is now, 15, let's see, the first exam was 2008. So yeah, about 17 years old now. And we have over 1,200 individuals that have been certified. We need more. So we're constantly addressing those issues as well. So not only do we develop the standards, but we also developing individuals to help reach out to businesses in achieving compliance. And then we do have just resources for building departments, resources for business owners on our website on how to get a CAS property inspection and achieve compliance. And in our trainings, we try to, our CAS are required to achieve continuing education. And so our continuing education efforts encourage the dissemination of knowledge. It's beyond just going to get an inspection from a CAS. We encourage them to talk to the business owners and address maintenance concerns, right? Because environments aren't static, and even moving a plant near a door where you can't, what that affects, maneuvering clearance, so you can't open the door, even though it's not a construction related barrier in the sense of it's not fixed, it's fixed to many others, right? Like easily solved, you can move it. Well, don't put it there to begin with, right? And it doesn't take a contractor to move it for you like it would to do something that's actually physical in the building. So we try to work with our CAS to impart that type of knowledge to business owners about maintenance, doors, right? Maintaining the closer weight so that they're not heavy, and lots of tidbits. And I think it's important then for those business owners as well to educate their employees, right? So it's trying to disseminate information through channels, but the work is always there. It's always there.
Could you share the contact information for which they could find CASP resources,
Sure.
information about the state architect's office?
Absolutely. So our website is dgs.ca.gov/DSA. And that will get you to the DSA website. You can also Google Division of the State Architect and click on the link, and that will get us to our website. There is a resources tab up at the top. Once you click on that, you'll see many of our resources, but one of them for property owners is CASP inspection services. And you can click on that, and that's a lot of information for business owners. If you're interested in the Certified Access Specialist program, it's still under it's under services, and it would be apply and maintain CASP certification. We also have an education arm for design professionals called our DSA Academy. And that's under our resources tab too. And there's free access compliance training to meet licensure requirements for license renewal for architects. And there's also educational fare for the general population as well, not just to meet the continuing education, but for our CASPs who may not all be architects, they can also take the training on advancing and understanding the standards.
Great resources. Thank you. So next for Erica Wood, if you would, as a representative of the business community, what do you see as the greatest barriers faced by businesses in the city to achieving access compliance for customers with disabilities? And do you have suggestions for how those barriers can be removed or reduced?
Yeah, thank you. So there's a lot to say on this one. And I think first and foremost is that the businesses that I talk to who are members of the chamber, just have a general lack of awareness about what it means to be access compliant and focused on other priorities. So in my conversations with them, and by and large, we serve small businesses, when I have conversations with them, access issues are not top of mind. Keeping their doors open is. And we've talked about some of the market pressures, particularly on smaller businesses that are retail. Many of us enjoy the convenience of Amazon to order our goods and our supplies, and it means, less market for smaller businesses. So if a business is motivated to become compliant, I think the next barrier for them is, how do I do it? What do I need to know? And as I was preparing for this session today, I was trying to reground myself in the different federal law requirements, the state law requirements, and the requirements relate to, the physical spaces in which businesses operate. So there are facility considerations, there are online and digital considerations, website accessibility that needs to be considered. And then there are, program access requirements, how a business goes about doing what it does. And those requirements have different oversight bodies associated with them. So if we just hone in on the physical requirements for a moment, you're talking about California Building Code, and you're often talking about local permitting processes through local government. And if you're an older building, there are even more things that need to be considered. And San Mateo has a lot of older buildings. So it gets overwhelming, I think, really, really fast. And if I'm trying to keep my operations going, that's going to be my top priority. And then I think I'll just emphasize something that's probably not going to be a surprise to anyone in the room. That is cost. What does it take if I'm motivated to know what I need to do to be access compliant? What is it going to cost me? And the Certified Access Specialist Program is a great resource. I think the average cost for a CASP inspection is about $2,000. And I'm here to tell you that $2,000 may not seem significant to those of us in this room, but for smaller businesses that are putting everything on the line to keep it going, that are dipping into personal savings to keep it going, that are tapping extended family members to keep it going, $2,000 is a tough sell. Another piece that I will say is we enjoy incredible diversity in San Mateo County and within the city of San Mateo. So for many of our business owners and operators, English is not a primary language. We have a large Asian community and multiple Asian languages. So as I think about suggestions to overcome some of these barriers, I think about, and we've said it here already, continuing education. And continuing education, not just in times of crisis. We all lived through the flurry of lawsuits during the height of the COVID years that put a lot of fear into local businesses. But education continuously on what resources exist. Who are some of those CASP specialists that people can reach out to? And are they in my area? It was interesting. I was talking with some city colleagues in preparation for this conversation too. And I said, does the city happen to have resources about access on your website anywhere? And we went back and forth on trying to figure out which local entity had those resources available. So certainly as a chamber, we can do more to help educate. I think there are more suggestions that I have, and I see that we're getting the time notices, so I'll share more as we progress later. Okay, it's really okay.
You're good. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you. So the next question for Ben and for Peter, as representatives of the disability community, and I know you're individuals, but you're also identifying a community of individuals with certain needs. What misconceptions do you believe are held by members of the business community about your access needs? And how do those misconceptions affect members of the disability community? You guys can flip for it.
So my first reaction to this question was displaying that we're a valuable consumer too, and just that we're willing to contribute to the multiplying dollars, I guess, that's in the community. But good points have been raised here. It's also that, and I'm thinking more as this conversation evolves, it's really that open communication, right? And I think we have a great beginning of that conversation right here. But it's carrying that conversation forward and how we carry out that conversation and let people know how can my community contribute to your community? How can we figure it out together? Because I do think that there's many valued struggles and viewpoints on either side of this conversation. But at the end of the day, if we don't come together and help each other figure it out, you know, it's just gonna go on. And I think there are people in here that want to find that we all want to find answers together. But as you know, as people know, there are situations that arise that make that more difficult, right? It pits two communities against each other. And I think the more we have a more constructive dialogue, it will lessen that pitting of two communities against each other. And we can get to more constructive solutions than where we are at this moment.
Thank you. Peter?
Okay, what do I think is biggest misconception of the business community about access needs and how they affect us? I think personally, I had to think on this, and you spoke, Erica, on the numbers that we spend. I think one misconception that many business owners or small business owners have is that the return on investment on making your establishment more accessible is not worth it. And I do understand, my cousin is a small business owner. And yes, a few $1,000s, or I believe it's maybe $8,000 to $10,000 possibly or more for just a button to open the door is a large expense. And my cousin had to put it in fear of litigation. But let me get back to what the misconceptions are. I personally believe that the misconception is that the money spent in making your business more accessible won't have a return on its investment. And I would argue against that. I personally know many disabled people, they love to go out to eat. As a person with disability, I think dining out is our entertainment. And I personally know a handful of people that are disabled that are willing to drop $1,000 on dinner without a blink of an eye. And they love to spend their money in restaurants. But if that restaurant is not accessible, they won't go there. And, you know, I want to bring it back to the point about what disability means. I mean, we're not talking about people like myself or people like Ben. I mean, there's many grandparents. How many elderly people are in wheelchairs? How many elderly people are in walkers? I think we all realize that isolation is one of the biggest. I mean, COVID has shown us that isolation has been terrible, and I think it's what drove the economy from one of goods. It's more about experiences. The economy is totally shifted now. People are looking for experiences, and that includes the disabled community. And I have to say, for most of us, that is going out to eat. And, you know, I just think that if business owners And I know as a small business owner, margins are tight. So you're not left with very much, but I do believe that the more accessible, inclusive, the more people you will have frequent your business.
Thank you, Peter. And our next question to Erica Wood is, as a representative of the business community, what misconceptions do you believe are held by people with disabilities about your access efforts? And how do those misconceptions affect businesses in the city?
Great question. I think that one of the misconceptions is that businesses don't care, and there are, in reality, probably some that don't. But I want to believe that by and large, businesses do care, and they just need some help, and they need to know how to be access compliant. And as a Chamber of Commerce, I look forward to playing more of a role in that area of education. And I think that fear looms large for a lot of our businesses because of the lawsuits that we saw a couple of years ago, and they came at the worst possible time. I remember talking to businesses in the hometown where I live, Half Moon Bay, who said, it has been hard enough to keep things going during the pandemic. And this lawsuit is now the nail on my coffin. I'm closing my doors. So that threat of litigation, I think, does loom large and create fear for people. And sometimes fear means inertia, that I'm just not going to do anything, keep my head down. I think another misconception is that things should be easy to fix once identified, and that businesses have the financial resources and the means to do it. And, as I talked about earlier, that's not necessarily the case. The Chamber was very involved in working with some businesses in a business district that doesn't tend to get the love like our downtown or our major shopping center, Hillsdale. And this was a woman-owned, immigrant-owned business, and 2 women running it. One woman had a baby, couldn't keep working at the business. They were trying to do everything right, trying to give back to their community, and just could not make things pencil out. And so tragically, they had to close their doors, and this was just a couple of weeks ago. So I think being sensitive to the fact that it's not, small businesses are all different, and by and large, many are still challenged with the economic times that we find ourselves in. And something that Ben said that I would just underscore is I think these misconceptions breed distrust, and distrust breeds lack of cooperation. And I just think that there is so much more we can do together, and look forward to doing together through strategic partnership, through, future dialogues like this one.
Okay. So a closing question for our panel members. What suggestions do you have for improving understanding and dialogue between business owners and people with disabilities? So if you were to make one major 30-second recommendation, what would it be? And let's start with you, Ida, if we could.
Wow. I think it's for business owners to just stop and think. I think there's this mindset when you discussed about return on investment. Well, I don't see individuals with disabilities wanting to access my facility, so therefore, why should I make improvements? There aren't that many in my neighborhood, right? And for me, it's twisting it around, saying maybe they're not coming because it's not accessible, right? And so it's trying to change the mindset through education, right? That kind of the whole, if you build it, they will come type thing. Like really start saying it's a business owner's responsibility, and all of us trying to create those resources to help them get accessible, like the disability access or the access compliance fund that are in local jurisdictions. I think it's it's how can we help businesses be more accessible so that they have greater understanding, so that all of them can be more accessible, right? Instead of living in a culture of fear and denial, and I'm just gonna keep my head low and ignore it for today, and maybe I'll be
It'll go
okay.
away.
It'll go away. Yeah, and so maybe a good point is demanding more from our jurisdictions on what they can do with their access compliance fund. Every jurisdiction has one. And really saying, how are you being proactive in helping our businesses achieve compliance
Yes.
in some manner, right? What is it that you can do?
And making those resources more available and accessible and easier to find.
Exactly.
Mhm. And also what I'm hearing is, and I really appreciate what Peter was saying, people like to eat out, but you want to eat out in a way that feels comfortable and joyful. You don't want to have to enter going through all the way through the back and through the kitchen and up through the front. You want to enter through the front door with everyone else. So there's minimum accessibility, but there's good accessibility. So.
Yeah, and I think it extends also to, as you were saying, when we're talking about when you're beginning a business and you're looking at your ambiance, you do need to pay attention to everything down to what are the tables you're providing? How are you setting them up?
Yes.
Accessible tables are important, but it doesn't mean you need to have the one table with the little ISA on it, right? The
Yes.
international symbol. It should be, all your tables should be able to accommodate accessibility by that table for everyone, right? And understand the policy of how you're going to make it accessible to all when the table becomes available.
Yes.
So I know that we're talking a lot about margins and return on investment, but if a lot of the accommodations are tight, so you can have more people, so you can make more money, it makes it more difficult to, right?
Education,
Exactly.
consciousness.
Exactly.
Erica?
Gosh, so hard to think of one thing. So it might be a couple of things, but I'll be quick. I think, approaching these conversations with a mindset and a frame around, we do have shared goals and we can find common ground. It doesn't need to be a zero-sum game. I think it's really important for businesses to understand that this really isn't a nice to have, it's a must have, and they need to see access as a civil right for persons with disability, and it's part of their civic responsibility. And I would say, again, looking to chambers of commerce as allies in this work. One of the things that we have going for us, according to Gallup surveys that are done every so often, is that the community trusts us. We've been around since 1939. We have, long-standing roots in our community. We bring businesses together regularly for monthly education sessions, networking. There's no reason that part of those gatherings can't be devoted to some of what we're talking about here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just picking up with that theme, it's breaking down silos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now Kelly, my colleague, attends Chamber of Commerce meetings pretty regularly, social hours or whatnot. But it really takes all of the community to engage with each other, right? And not be afraid of the hard conversations. I mean, this event's been great. But coming into it, I thought it was gonna be a difficult conversation. But it turns out it's not really that difficult. It's just an exchange of ideas. So we need to get more comfortable having these conversations with different groups. Get the business community to hear our perspective, hear the business community's perspectives, see how we can work together. I would definitely like to be a part of more listening sessions if that's needed. But definitely work together in partnership to make this happen rather than, like I was saying before, pitting two communities against each other, right? So, sounds like we all want it. Nobody's closed off to how things can be. We all want to make it more accessible, so we just need to, it's not gonna happen overnight, but we need to take those steps, share the resources of how people can take advantage to making these things happen, and work together. We'll get there if we can work together on it.
And Peter, comment from you, and then we'll open it up to our audience.
Okay, I was thinking of this and, one thing that I thought of is that, like I mentioned, my cousin is a small business owner, and, as a small business owner, you're worried about making payroll, worried about your employee coming in, ADA compliances. I completely understand. You work from the moment you wake up to when you go to sleep. This is not on the forefront on your mind, but unfortunately, there aren't more business people in the room. But an example I can bring up, and I just thought of this last night, was we went to go frequent a restaurant, and it was totally accessible. It wasn't that, but we wanted to watch the ball game. For some reason they had fireplaces all over their TV. We asked if we could, change the channels on the TV. The employee said, unfortunately, the owner is out of town. We're not able to reach him. So, I think there's a big disconnect between the disability community or people who are disabled and business owners. And if I can make one suggestion, I know there are serial litigators out there, the people out there just purely to make profit off of small businesses. But there's also people like Ben and myself and others who want to voice our concerns, but don't want to throw a lawsuit for a small business owner who's making 60 grand a year. It's ridiculous. But oftentimes they're impossible to find. You could look at the website, you could go reach out to an employees say, I can't reach them. If I had to make one suggestion, as local business owners, if they can even leave their email address and a business card and hand it to a customer and say, if you have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to the business owner. So some form of communication or a line of communication from the customer directly to the business owner, I think would be amazing. Because in my opinion, there's too far of a disconnect between the disabled community and business owners. Disabled people are purely focused on, I just want to be able to access this. Business owners want to make money. And somewhere in the middle, if there's a little dialogue that we can have, maybe we can come to a common middle.
Thank you. Oh, so now we open it up to our community members, and we have mics coming through. You wanted to
Hi,
speak, this gentleman also.
Maureen O'Leary. I'm a resident of San Mateo and I have an HR background.
Great.
Well, I made a comment about the door here. I guess I don't really expect small businesses to have those type of doors, but I've only had positive experiences in San Mateo, and maybe because I'm an HR person, but I think that I've gotten so much help from all the business owners. So it's basically just having people like acknowledge your needs, and it's pretty easy to move tables around. For example, a table that has a pedestal in the middle, it's not so good when you're sitting in a wheelchair. So asking for a table where there's legs on either side. And from my experience, everybody is very receptive. I guess, yeah, so I think it's a education process, but it's also, I ask all the time for what I need. You know, I ask someone to open the door for me, and that's not a big deal. So I think it's more of the attitude and the education, and not necessarily putting in the door that with the button that's expensive, but having the personnel there, so there is somebody that could help me.
Thank you. Sir?
So my question, I have a question and a comment. My problem is that I don't always need a handicap parking spot. There's 5 people here that need wheelchair access. The only button by what she says is on the front door. But there's 6 spots out here that are taken. It's don't take the handicap spots. Don't use them for anything else besides handicap. Don't serve your customers that want to do a drive up and park in the handicap parking spot, because that takes it away from someone that needs it. There's 5 wheelchair spots. There's a tent in this one and whatever else, and you can't even access them here. And I'm not saying it's a problem. It's just look and open the eyes. The other problem, and it's a question for Miss Ida, and I don't know if she can answer a question or not, is can you remove your whole parking lot with handicap and say, we're not going to have any parking anymore, and make a place less accessible, knowing that, is there something in the building code that you can do?
So parking requirements are usually left up to local zoning ordinances. So accessible parking in the building code is required when parking is provided, but the building code serves the entire state. It's not jurisdiction specific. So a local jurisdiction has zoning code requirements. And in that zoning code, they could say you don't need to provide parking. There may not be an obligation to provide parking, but if you do, then yes, you need to provide accessible parking, and then they have requirements on the space sizes. So that's whether or not provide parking is subject to the local jurisdiction. It's not in the building code.
Okay, let me put it a different way. They have accessible parking now. They're taking their parking spots out to put a patio in. No handicap parking spots within 1/8 of a mile.
So that's not legal if they provide parking.
But if they take all their parking spots out and turn their,
That's up to the local jurisdiction to
okay.
determine if they have any zoning requirement that requires them to provide parking or not provide parking. But the building code says when parking's provided, accessible parking must be provided.
And I just wanted to add to that, a great resource, and I'm gonna hawk our own resources, that the California Commission on Disability Access, we have been embarking on an accessible parking campaign with local business partners over the last couple of years. And we have on our website an accessible parking campaign toolkit. We have 2 toolkits, one for business owners and one for the construction industry. And so I say that because if you could promote that, if you see a business that might need some education on that, you could give them that toolkit. Also, I'll make sure that Erica, your partners have them as well, because it's a really great resource that was developed by people with disabilities and industry leaders to educate a lot about what Ida just said, but also to kind of empower them to know what the requirements are and to know how to solve what you're talking about. Because a lot of businesses, we hear this a lot, that, well, you created, during COVID, you created your outdoor patio and then you took out all your accessible parking, or you made it a to-go place or whatever. And now I can't park there. So our toolkit does talk about that. So I just wanted to give that as a resource. So
I'll explain. I got the plans 45 minutes before that. They're going to take all of their parking out now. That was handicapped. Every parking spot is coming out, and it just got approved by the city. And it's not around here. I don't live around here, but I needed more information. So I took the drive here, but they are taking away all the parking and making it less accessible, because the only parking around there is not ADA compliant. And the city is spending $4 million to make it. They said they'd do it 4 years ago. So it's just a problem of making someplace less accessible than it is.
May I comment?
Please,
on that?
yes.
I think it's important to understand from the building code perspective, right? Because I said parking requirements, there's some large jurisdictions, small jurisdictions, often some locations near transit will say you don't have to provide parking to encourage more transit riding. That's why zoning is in the local jurisdiction. Understanding the concept of the ADA, it's about equal access. So if all parking's removed, essentially, that's where that, right? No one can park. And so that's what makes it equal. Does it make it accessible to everyone? Or no, but the concept of the ADA is that this concept of equal access. That's why the building code says when parking's provided, it must be, you must also provide accessible parking. But I will say that what's important is to look at the business practices of this business entity. I'm assuming it's a restaurant, yes?
Yes, yes. it is.
So if they allow a drop off at the front and a drive off, technically they have a passenger loading zone, and that passenger loading zone should be accessible. So if they are permitting practices, even if they don't have parking, you have to look that those practices are also accessible.
Okay, no, I'm sorry for the strange question. It's a
Yeah.
very strange area. And their second business, their handicap is behind a gate that is always closed and locked.
Well,
So,
we're glad that we could address it to
Yeah,
some
I'm sorry.
level here. No, thank you for bringing it up. It was important, and thank you for the responses. That was very, very helpful. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes. Arnie Lerner.
There are also some jurisdictions in the state have regulations that require a property owner, if they're going to be leasing or selling their property. In San Francisco, you have to let that person know ahead of time whether the entrance or the bathroom is accessible before they sign on the dotted line, so that they can use that as part of their negotiations. And the state has a law as well covering something similar. And also one aspect that people haven't really talked about that involve a lot of these lawsuits are online on their websites. There's a lot of that, and I don't know how much cities are trying to help educate business owners about their websites, but they're very vulnerable in that. And the drive-by guys are at it again. In San Francisco, we tried with requirements for the entrance, which is what you can see. I can drive down the street and tell right away, oh, it's about the width, there's a step, I can look at the hardware. And that's a very vulnerable part, is the entrance. And so those are just some comments that might be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Lerner. You know, something related is, are commercial landlords required to help their business tenants in making their space compliant and accessible? That was a question that came up. Anyone
May
have-
I address
Please,
that?
yes.
So the state law, and I don't remember in what part it is in, I could get that information. There is a state law that for every lease agreement that's been executed after January 1st, 2017, the facility owner is supposed to indicate whether or not they've had a CASP inspection. If they haven't, they must allow the prospective tenant to hire a CASP and provide their own inspection, even though they don't have, and permit them on their property for an inspection prior to signing the lease. And the goal of that law was that it would create this discussion, because when a facility is not compliant, or when an individual with a disability files a claim, they will, under both state and federal law, both the business owner and the property owner are responsible. And it's the responsibility of the business owner and the property owner to figure out who's going to make corrections. So they're trying to the law attempted to preempt that, to say, have those discussions now so that you know. And then it's also, well, if it's not accessible, probably go find another place that might be so that you're not, it's supposed to preempt all those discussions. Honestly, I don't know how well it's working because we have no measure to track that. But that is in state law right now. I just don't know how often, I don't know how effective it is.
Yes.
also tax credits.
Oh, 1 second, let's get a mic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's also tax credits for making improvements for disabled access that you need to let prospective business owners know about. It's not just all out of their pocket.
Any other questions or comments? So let me throw this question out and we'll do a couple more and then we'll be done for the day. What are public transportation requirements? I asked because in the RSVP question, somebody had asked that question.
In the building code
Well,
or
what are
in general or?
In general.
the question was, what are public transportation requirements, I guess, relative to access?
So.
Now, most buses do have accessible lifts.
So a public entity,
Mhm.
whether it's a transit district, whether it's a city, whether that operates bus service, whether it's BART, whether it's any transportation entity, if it's publicly funded, it's under Title II of the ADA, must have their programs accessible. If it's privately funded, it's a service they're offering, so they must also think of accessibility. So there is the standards are a little different for a public entity because it's considered a program, and so they have to address it program-wide. For an individual who's private, they have to address it essentially per establishment, per place of business. The difference between program access and goods and services access. So the answer is yes. I
Yes.
mean, but no one's excluded from that. It just depends on who owns it and
Pays for it.
how they look for it, right?
Thank you. All right. Well, I thank the panel members. It was a very robust, full, engaging conversation among all of us, and I thank you all for that. Thank you for letting me moderate. I really enjoyed the process, and I'll pass it on to April Dawson Rawlings to make our final comments.
Well, on behalf of the California Commission on Disability Access, I just want to thank all of you for being here today. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, our wonderful moderator. I would like to thank Erica and the San Mateo Chamber of Commerce. I would also like to thank Lahia and her team from CID. Lahia had to step out a little bit early, but her team continued to represent her well, and I'll let her know that. Also, Ida and the Division of the State Architect for your partnership, as well as our staff back there, Presley and Abby. And
Presley and Abby.
I would also like to thank our captioners, our ASL interpreters, and our Spanish language interpreters for being here today and sharing your talents and creating accessibility with us. I just want to also share that all of the resources that we pointed to today are available on our website and will also be sent out to all of you who registered. If you walked in and just heard about us and didn't register, I encourage you to get on CCDA's mailing list. You could stop by the back table, which is right behind the wall, and talk with Abigail or Presley, who are in the black shirts, very well coordinated. And I also want to share that the feedback that many of you shared about this particular space, we do work closely with this hotel, so I will meet with their management and I will tell them about the doors and the parking and some feedback that I've received. And so that will go to the management. I'll also share that with my colleague at the Hotel and Lodging Association, so that could be a training moment. So thank you for that feedback. So it will go somewhere. And I just want to encourage all of you to engage with the California Commission on Disability Access, either through going to our website, to our resources tab, getting on our mailing list. We are a public entity that was created by the state legislature in 2009 as a way to create dialogue and to prevent high frequency litigation, as well as promote disability access to businesses in general. So all of our meetings are subject to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act and are public. And you can see when our next meeting will be in Sacramento, but will also be hybrid on Zoom in June. And so if you go to our meetings tab and our resources tab, you can get all the information from today our toolkits and everything, and then learn about how to engage in our meetings. You can also join one of our subcommittees as a stakeholder member when there's openings, and you can contact me directly about that and how to engage with us more. And this is definitely not going to be the last time that we connect. I'm going to meet with Erica and with Lahia and talk about how we can use our resources at the state level to promote the local relationships and to provide more conversations around this topic. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. And I look forward to some more rich discussions in the future in San Mateo County and also across the state. So thank you so much.
Thank you.